No, you drive.
Yeah, and they take forever to run.
Right. Trust me.
I just don't run for like
Usually
12 hours.
classes, you might
trust me,
want
I
to
know.
And I have like, 30 something things. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I picked the
Actually, it's
end.
very close to my house. It's only Riverside. Yeah, so it's pretty close. Hi, Dr. Smith. Hi, good to see you again.
I'm going to sit at the end.
Perfect. Oh, excellent.
Great, we're right.
Oh, we can move it. Yes.
Fortunately, you get the tablecloth.
Quite fine.
Yeah. Trust me, I know it's like, because for my research, right, all the simulations, I show you.
Yep. Yeah, about the heaviest laptop in the world to run those things.
I bought like one of those like,
I'm going to put my basket at the back.
16 core processors.
Yeah,
Now, research is reasonable, right? But before, I was just like,
I was promoted.
multiple computers, just like, what?
Director assistant.
Hopefully promotion came. Yeah.
It did.
And you were doing it.
That doesn't
couple
always
years
happen.
ago, so,
Oh yeah,
like,
sometimes you
even
get
when things
promotion
were
title
even slow,
only
like,
and no raise.
then,
More responsibility, same money.
Yeah, more responsibility. Yeah,
But-
that did not happen. I did get
unless
more
that's
money.
That's how it's
right, right.
Writing my own Bayesian software. No.
People there are coming, they're just gonna be doing one of those. Yeah, well, and, you didn't have it going to college first, so they're gonna. Probably.
They'll forget.
I just met with someone who drove down from Michigan just to attend this. I was like, we're gonna post this online.
Really?
Yeah, I met with her in my office.
From Michigan.
She's in the certificate, she's gonna.
Oh, yeah,
go
okay.
Full master.
So, I sent messages, let me just see if anybody is.
So I guess that means they're filming this, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I would have worked. I'm representing now I'm representing before I was just attending the university event.
I was just like, well, I don't read the whole thing.
No, I didn't. I only realized yesterday that it was in a different building and at a different time. I emailed it. Yesterday. I'm like, I can't say 5:50. Doesn't this? It's 3:45 to 5. Right? For like 10 years, it's like 3:45 to 5.
I know, I saw that.
Yeah.
No, that's,
You will probably see a little bit of an influx of people coming in around 5 too, just to let you know. So, I don't know exactly what's going on there, but the ProSem, it's not the ProSem folks, it'll be other visitors, faculty or whoever.
By 5.
Around 5, there's some other meeting that ends at 5, and,
I'm glad I don't know about it.
yeah. Right? We're all in that mode of too many meetings and innovations all this time of year, so.
so, this is a pro sem, and then it's online too?
Yeah, they just told me it was live streamed like 2 days ago. So I just found out that they were live streaming. But they're gonna record it and they're gonna edit it and.
Oh, good.
I don't remember signing my waiver.
To keep it clean.
All right, live stream, this is
Is
the
that
new
still,
thing.
is that still going out live stream?
Yeah, this is the new thing at UIC, I'll just warn you that everything's live streamed now.
Oh, man.
All the job talks.
I don't know who it's going out to because we didn't advertise it.
Well, it'll be on a little YouTube thing somewhere,
Right.
and I don't know if do these guys work for UIC or are they working?
I have no idea where we are.
Yes, okay.
So then there's an unedited version and then an edited version out there floating around.
Yes. They were nodding yes to UIC.
Adding to UIC, so
Yes.
it's, you guys are part of that, right? So then they do job talks, they do Provost campus conversations, there's a whole new genre of welcome to the modern age.
And Becca came early to give a glorious PR spiel that
Yes.
we'll put up as well.
Oh, good, okay.
So were you guys recording all this time?
So the rest of the world is watching us.
So I blew my nose right away.
I'm
This
not
time, too.
seeing, let's see, 2, 4, 5. I know we're gonna have a couple people who are pretty regularly late, but,
As long as they don't come in through that door, we'll be.
yeah, that's, I opened that one, so
Okay.
hopefully people will come and.
Well, I think we need Sean here, because I think he's gonna try to moderate something. Let me see if I can grab him and then I'll get started. Otherwise, we'll just.
Okay. It's so exciting to see you guys back. But, you know, we're all older, but we look the same, right?
I've done this every year.
Okay, I guess we'll just begin.
Last time I saw you,
I think I've
you were like half the.
we've done it like 7 times now.
Oh, no. They don't ask me every year.
What's the title for this?
Well, even though I was graduated, I wasn't around.
Tara, what's the title for your session here? Where our students go or something like that?
Yeah, all the places they can go. This is mirrored after the Dr. Seuss book.
All the places?
All the places they can go.
Okay. You guys been recording already? Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the Educational Psychology Pro Seminar. My name is Everett Smith. I'm a professor of Ed Psych and the College of Education here at UIC. I kind of run and oversee some of the Mesa programs here. I'll try to give a little bit of history on the programs before we get to our presenters. The title for tonight's session is Where Our Students...
Oh, the places
they can go. We typically do this every couple of years. We try to get in former students and colleagues in the Mesa area to come in and talk about where they work, the nature of their work, how they got into their fields, what types of skills are needed to get into their fields, and what type of activities you guys can engage in as grad students to try to get your foot in the door in these fields as well. So we try to bring in folks that represent different areas, different Mesa areas of measurement, evaluation, statistics, assessment. But if you look at the job boards, pretty much anywhere, people with quant skills are in need throughout the job market. So whether you're looking at government, federal, state, local, if you're looking at institutional research, if you're looking for academia, licensure, certification, program eval, there's lots of jobs. And if you're mobile, so the ability to get up and move, there's really no excuse not to be able to get a job if you complete a degree in Mesa. See, everybody's nodding. I'm going to give a little bit of quick history on Mesa in general, and then we're going to get into some of our presenters, and then we'll have, I think since some of them have to leave early, after each presenter we'll do Q&A, if you have any Q&A based on their topic. I came here in '98, and the reason I tried to get a job at UIC is because the original Mesa program at the University of Chicago College of Education was shutting down. And that Mesa program educated some of the, in my opinion, greatest psychometricians literally in the world, in the field that I try to specialize in called Roche measurement. So with that closing down, there was really no PhD program that I would consider a PhD program in the city of Chicago in measurement. So there's a huge need. So when I interviewed, I didn't mention my plan at all. Because when I got the job, I went to my then department head and I said, okay, well, University of Chicago is shutting down. We need to really open up a PhD program to address the job market. She says, no, you're an assistant professor, just publish and bring in grant money. And I said, no, there's really a need, so we're going to do it. And so with the help from administration, we got the PhD passed. And then it was Terry teaching research methods, then Dr. T teaching stats, and myself teaching measurement. And we got no support, meaning more faculty, until each of us had about 10, 12 advisees. Then they're like, okay, you've demonstrated there's a need, and they hired 2 more faculty. A few years later, our dean said, Ev, PhD's been good, let's do a master's program. So we did the campus Mesa program. A few years after that, the dean said, Ev, College of Ed is a little bit behind in online learning. Mesa's going to be the guinea pig, put it online. We were able to secure the resources to do that, and literally We did an environmental scan, and we were literally the first graduate program in Mesa in the entire world to be completely online. What's really been neat is just interacting with folks from all over the world. Some folks from Africa have been in the program, Middle East, Asia, Europe, mostly the United States still, but it's really interesting interacting, even though it's in an online environment for these folks from all over the world. It's been very successful. We reach our goals every year. They want me to increase our targets. I was like, no, I like the targets where they are, but they want me to, they as administration, want me to increase targets. And with our success, for those of you who are looking at this video, hopefully you do your due diligence. With our success, other universities have popped up Mesa-type programs online as well. It's probably about 5 or 6 of them. With the School of Continuing Studies, they notify me when these programs pop up, and I review their curriculum. There's not a single one of them that has the curriculum we do. So if you do your don't take my word for it, do your due diligence, look over their curriculum, look over our curriculum, and if you want something that's more rigorous and has more high-end courses, there's really not going to be any little type of comparison. But I'd be happy to answer questions. At the end of the video, I'm sure there'll be a link to a website where you can contact the School of Continuing Studies or contact myself if you have any questions about the program. With that, I'd like to welcome my guests, former students and colleagues, or former students that are now colleagues. We're going to let the 2 folks on the end go first, starting with Becca. What I guess I'd like to do is maybe name, title, where you work, the nature of your work. If you're working on an interesting project that you want to share, so you can see how what skills are applied to what you're doing. And then the couple of points that I mentioned earlier on, what students can do now to try to prepare themselves to get a foot in the door in your field. And if you want to talk about past jobs, because I know many of you have had past jobs too that are in somewhat different but related fields, so we can cover the whole gamut, that would be great as well. So for that, I'll hand it over to Becca.
So my name is Rebecca Levin, and I am the Director of Evaluation and Learning at the McCormick Foundation in Chicago. I guess I'll start first with my career. Before I was here, I worked at a hospital, and then I worked at the University of Illinois teaching evaluation. And then I worked at and then ran an applied research center here in Chicago that addressed issues of social and economic justice. And so in my job as the Director of Evaluation and Learning at the Foundation, much of my work is teaching. So I work with all of our staff at the foundation to help them use evaluation to drive our own work, to drive our own understanding of the efficacy of our work. And then I work with many of the organizations that we fund to help them use evaluation as a tool to serve them, not just to serve the foundation or for PR or to get funding. So in terms of the skills that are important for my position and for the position of many of the evaluators with whom I work who walk into organizations or walk into foundations where people don't really have an understanding of evaluation, who don't really know what it is that they want or think they want one thing and may think that's what they want because somebody told them that's what they want. What's important to have is a very wide breadth of understanding of evaluation, of all different types of evaluation, not just quantitative and qualitative, but evaluation that's designed for doing policy studies, for evaluation that's important for doing organizing, evaluation of direct practice organizations, so that when you walk into an organization, you can learn, you can listen to what it is that they're doing, and have a good sense of what it is that how it is that evaluation could actually serve their needs, and then work with them to do those things. And in the case of organizations, sometimes they are being asked to provide data, whether it's by the government or by private foundations, in order to get funding. And part of what your job is then is to help them understand A, how to get those data, and then B, if those data really aren't helping them, what are ways that evaluation could be used to serve the needs of that organization. So in terms of what is important for Mesa students, I would highly encourage you to take courses that are out of your area of initial interest. If you think of yourself as a qualitative person, take quant courses. If you're a quant person, take qualitative courses. Because if I don't know that somebody has enough skills to understand both kinds of data collection and the value of them, it's unlikely that I would send them into a job, because I need to know that if something that they weren't intending to be doing is what's needed, even if they aren't going to be the ones to do it, that they know what it is that is needed. So a good breadth of experience is important, and then getting actual experience doing evaluations for organizations that you can show to people who are looking to hire you is critical as well. Again, I will not send somebody in to do an evaluation or recommend somebody to do an evaluation for an organization or for another philanthropy if I don't have proof that they know what they're doing, because evaluation has earned its horrible reputation. And because it's been done so badly to so many individuals and to so many communities. And so if I have the opportunity to get a good evaluation done, I'm not going to risk it with somebody who may not know what they're doing. So I highly encourage you to both get the training and the schooling that you need through a wide breadth of courses, and then actually get experience doing evaluations so that you can show what it is that you're able to do.
What kind of job prospects are there for folks that want to get into program evaluation?
Yeah, well, there's not a whole lot of job prospects in philanthropy itself for full-time positions like mine. So there are two people in the city, myself and then the director of evaluation at the MacArthur Foundation. And other than that, philanthropies tend to hire evaluators for projects within their organizations, or recommend them or hire them to do work with other nonprofits. But there is a lot of opportunity for doing evaluation with nonprofits and with organizations that are looking to use evaluation to understand what it is they're doing, to verify what it is they're doing, to advocate for it is what they're doing. So there's a lot of evaluation available, and I would say in particular if you are a person of color, we need you desperately. There are a good number of white evaluators out there. We can always use more, but there are not a lot of people of color in evaluation, and it is a problem for me as somebody who's recommending evaluators to go into communities where I'm sending in white people into communities of color, and that's okay in some cases, but in a lot of cases it would be a whole lot better to be sending in a person from the community to be involved in doing the evaluation. So I highly encourage any people of color who are interested in this to look into it.
Thanks, Becca. And I just want to add that what Becca is saying about the need is corresponding to what we've observed as well. So what's next on the Mesa online agenda is to actually develop a certificate program so you can show some kind of specialization within evaluation. We're hoping to roll that out probably within the next year or two. So we're trying to, again, address some market needs there.
And I would also encourage people, regardless of what your race or gender is, that you get training in cultural competency when you're doing evaluation, because white people can do good work in communities of color, but we need to be trained, and people of color need to be trained as well. I mean, this cultural competency is a really important, not just a side thing to say, oh yeah, I took my elective in cultural competency. It's having a very strong impact on what's being done, how it's being done, and it certainly is something when I'm looking to hire somebody, I'm looking to see whether or not that's something that they have.
Any interesting project that you can tell us about that you're working on?
Yeah, we're doing a project that is looking at coming up with common metrics across 30 different organizations working in one particular area that we're funding, because what we found is that we're not able to look at how our different organizations faring with particular issues and contrasting them with other organizations. And it's not just to be able to say, well, this organization is doing better than that one, so we're going to fund that one. It's to try to understand which organizations organizations are having more effectiveness with which populations, under what circumstances, we using what kinds of methodologies. And so we have been working with a group of almost 29 organizations to come up with common ways of assessing their impact, and then looking at ways of assessing whether or not there are things that can be done to increase the effectiveness of the organizations based on the data that they're gathering together. And they have become a community of organizations working together to improve their own practice based on this evaluation data.
Sounds
So
like a measurement problem. Of course,
it's
everything's
far
not like
beyond a measurement problem, yeah.
Any questions for Rebecca? About evaluation or her field, or things you can do now to get into her field? Becca's gonna have to take off a little bit early, so if you got questions, get them out now.
Yeah.
To what do you attribute the shortage of evaluators of color?
Most people of color that I talk with who are professionals in other areas, when I talk with them about, when I think, oh, you would have been a great evaluator, tell me they didn't have any clue that this was even a field to go into. And so part of it is getting the word out there. And then part of it is there's not a whole lot that feels very sexy about evaluation. And part of what we need to do is make the case for why it is such a powerful tool for social and economic justice, because it is. And that is something that seems to be of great import to the people of color that I've been working with who are going on in professional areas. And so I think part of it is our own ineffectiveness at making the case for it and getting out to it. And then part of it is that we need examples of how and why this is such a meaningful career to go into.
Just to piggyback on what Becca was saying, there's really a dearth of Mesa people in general, not just evaluation, but across the Mesa fields, there's not a lot of people. And I think one of the things, Becca and I were talking earlier about it, is that there's no undergrad degree in Mesa. The closest thing you can probably get is an undergrad degree in psychology or in statistics. So those would probably be the two closest. But those would in no way prepare you to be an evaluator or a psychometrician. So most students aren't even aware of this field, which is one reason why I think there's so many job opportunities out there.
I was going to say, we have the same problem in the field of assessment. Our national organization we're working right now to try to figure out how to study how we can get more people of color into we have a lot of Asian representation, but not a lot of African American, Latino, Latina, so I know that our field, as nationally, is looking to recruit more people of color into the field, and I think there's just not a lot of people of color who are really sort of attracted to math.
I don't think anybody's attracted.
No. It's just like,
some of us are the rare exceptions.
yes.
Here. It's a math phobia. Anything else? Yeah.
Along those same lines, what attracted you to the field? Anyone, but maybe specifically Becca, since you're a little bit early, and also how did you find out about opportunities in the field?
So what attracted me, I was my background was in social work, and I got my PhD in it, and I heard about our history, and I learned about the group of people called the Friendly Visitors, and these were women back in the early 1900s who went into communities with intention to help people and to serve them, but what they did was really undermine the well-being of communities and undermine the power structures that were there, the wisdom that was there. And part of the reason that they had no idea that they were doing this, because they believed very strongly what they were doing was beneficial, was there was no evaluation, there was no research, there was nothing to check to see whether or not what we were doing was effective. And as I understood that, I started thinking about how so much of what we do we believe is right or wrong because it feels right in our gut, and it's not because we've done systemic evaluation. And that's what drew me to it initially. And then the way that I found out about jobs was one led to another. It wasn't anything planned out. But one person, when you do good work, people know about it, and they talk to each other, and then you hear about it through other people. Now there's the organization, the American Evaluation Association, and many people find out about jobs through that and find each other through that, and it's very much an issue of networking. So that's how it worked for me.
I think, again, just to piggyback, and just from the psychometricians that I know, because that's my area, I can't think of one that set out to be a psychometrician. They all backed into the field. For myself, I was going through teacher education program. So I was a high school math teacher. And as part of that program, I had to take a course in measurement, so how to make tests and assign grades to kids. And I was like, wow, I never knew this stuff existed. And the place where I took it said, hey, we just got a federal grant. If you want to come back for your PhD, we'll pay the way. I was like, well, let's avoid reality for another 4 years. So I said, sure. And otherwise, I'd be still teaching high school math. So I mean, and I think quite a few psychometricians, and maybe Andrew can comment on this when it's his turn, we really literally backed into the field because I didn't even know it existed. Now I'm running the show. Anything else for Becca? Yeah.
I'm interested in the evaluation, but I want to know about what kind of data are you used for the evaluation?
So the kind of data that we use in the foundation world and in nonprofits is completely tied to the questions that we're asking. Right? So we start with what are the questions that we want to answer, and who are those questions being answered for? Because different kind of people look at different kinds of data in different ways, and so we tend to encourage organizations to collect data of multiple types because it tends to make the power, the value of it much greater if you have different kinds of data to answer questions. So it is both quantitative data and qualitative data. It's very short term, and we try to get more longitudinal data. So both kinds, all kinds of data are valuable, but there isn't one kind of data that we think is the best, or even the term the gold standard, which they often apply to random control trials. Random control trials are terrific for certain kinds of projects, certain kinds of questions, and they're horrible for others. And there's nothing that makes the kind of question that random control trials answers better than the kinds that participatory evaluation within a community can answer. So the kind of data that we use, the kind of a methodology that we use is tied completely to what are the questions that are being asked and what are we going to try to do with the answers.
So collect everything. As long as it's pertinent to the research question. Anything else? Because I know Becca's got a slide on out. Well, Becca, thank you again for showing us. I really appreciate that.
You bet.
The help. Andrew, would you like to go next?
Yep. So I'm sorry, I have a cold, or I'm getting over a cold, so I have a cough drop in my mouth, and hopefully I can make it through 10 minutes here. So my name is Andrew Swanland. I'm a principal researcher at the American Institutes for Research. I work in our AIR, as we call ourselves, not AIR, if you ever see it. It's AIR. Has sort of three sides to our business. There's an assessment division that does state testing, online state testing, large scale. There's a research and evaluation section that does research or evaluation work. And then there's our what we call PPNSC, which stands for Policy, Practice, and Systems Change, which is technical assistance and really being out in schools and communities and helping bring about systemic change. And so the American Institutes for Research is a very large organization. We're a nonprofit behavioral and social science research organization with offices in the United States and internationally. We're somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 employees. It changes, so I don't know the exact number. And so I do evaluation, so I'm an evaluator, but I'm also a psychometrician. And as Becca was alluding to, there's different ways to do evaluation. So when I say I'm an evaluator, I would qualify as an evaluator for some of the types of things she's talking about, and then not for the others. So I've taken a course in qualitative research, and I work with qualitative researchers. I don't do qualitative research. In fact, people who are peer evaluators may look at me and say, "You're just a researcher. You're doing research. You're not doing evaluation." These are distinctions that you can learn about in a course on evaluation. One thing that I guess I'll talk about a couple projects. Well, let me talk about how I got into the field first, because Ev was alluding to that, and then I'll talk about a couple projects that I work on, so you get a sense of what I do. So I came into, I didn't know that program evaluation existed. I didn't know that psychometrics existed. I didn't know these things were fields. I had a bachelor's degree in math, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I went to get a PhD in statistics. That wasn't really for me either, because that's hard work. So I left with a master's degree, and because I was just avoiding reality, theoretical statistics is pretty rough. So I left with a master's degree in statistics, and I got hired by a company that did custom K-12 testing, and I worked in their psychometric services department. And I didn't know what that was, but I worked with a colleague of Ev's who taught me all about Rausch measurement. Through that, I met Ev because he would do some work with us occasionally. Yep. So first lesson, network. So through knowing, eventually, if you want to work in psychometrics, you need a PhD, generally speaking. And so I started looking at graduate programs, and I knew someone who had one. And through someone he knew in the Mesa program, I was offered a job out here in Chicago doing program evaluation and psychometrics and statistics alongside that. And so I moved out here and actually had the job that I still have prior to joining the program. So I never did a job search after the Mesa program.
I haven't got my percent.
What's that?
So I haven't got my percent for
right.
getting that job.
So I worked simultaneous to going through the Mesa program, and consequently took forever, for no particular reason, to finish my PhD. I mean, the coursework, 4 years, but the dissertation just dragged and dragged and dragged. So I would recommend getting it done earlier than I did. But I actually did this pro seminar for several years up here at the table, and I did not have my PhD yet. Everyone's, when are you going to finish? When are you going to finish? So I can report that I finished a couple of years ago. Yeah. So that's how I ended up here in this field. But again, I didn't know anything about it, and I think that's a reason people don't go into this field. Is that just there's no awareness of it. So in terms of the type of work I do, AIR has a number of different clients that we work with. We have a lot of federal funding from the U.S. Department of Education in particular to do research, and we also have several research and technical assistance centers. We work for foundations as an evaluator. So what Becca was talking about, they give out grants to organizations, and there's usually an evaluation component tied to that. And so we are an external evaluator for folks like that. And I'd say and then we also work for states and districts as well. And those are our primary sources of the work that we do. So currently I work on, I'd say, probably 10 different projects. One that's about to start up is we were, a partner organization of ours was recently awarded what's called a SEED grant. And this is, it's money that is given out to an organization to affect teacher practice. So it's primarily for training and raising teacher effectiveness in schools, and then there's a research component attached to it. So a grant may be $15 million, and then $2 million of it goes to research and evaluation to make sure that the program is being implemented and the field can learn if these are effective practices or not, if this is something that other places should adopt. And this is going to be a randomized control trial implemented in 58 school districts in 2 rural states focusing on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So very large endeavor that's about to get underway. So that's going to be a lot of work. Very excited about that. And I'm leading that. The other sort of a different project that I'm working on is we are working, this is being filmed, so I'm going to watch what I say, but we're working with a large organization focused on youth development that is a nationwide organization, and they are interested in looking at how their adult volunteers, the training that they've had to be those adult volunteers, their background, their sort of attitudes and beliefs and actions, and how those interact with the youth that are in the troops that they oversee. And so we're actually a subcontractor to an organization or to a university, and so we'll be administering surveys to approximately, I want to say it's 25,000 youth and 7,500 adults in 3 waves. And those surveys are currently being developed. So the youth survey has been developed and piloted. The adult survey has been developed and piloted, and actually I was working on the psychometrics on that adult survey today to see how can we cut down the length, because we're going to ask 7,500 people to do this, and there's currently 175 items on it, which is way too many. But there's they have a very, very complex theory of action of how the relationships among all these adult characteristics, so adult to adult relationships, adult to youth relationships, the extent to which youth leadership is a focus in this particular, youth development setting, et cetera. And so they're interested in measuring a lot of things, and to measure things well, you need to ask multiple items, and because otherwise you're wasting everyone's time if you're measuring things without any reliable information. So these are 2 completely different types of things I'm working on. One is large-scale survey research, sort of exploratory, looking at relationships among different constructs. The other is a very causal inference, randomized control trial, large-scale research project. I mean, it's an evaluation, but it's essentially testing whether or not something is having an impact. So that's sort of an example of what I do well, it's not what I do day to day, but that's what is going to, that's large picture what I'm currently doing. Day to day, it's answering emails and attending trainings on cultural competency.
And one thing I want to piggyback on what Andrew was saying is that you have to get a PhD. I think you have to get a PhD if you want to move up into kind of like leadership positions. I know some of our master's students, one who was supposed to be here but came ill, she actually worked for, I always call it AIR, so sorry, AIR. She had her master's in Mesa, and she was doing a lot of the stat work there. But Andrew's right. I think almost all organizations, although I think that type is shifting a little bit because there's not enough people to fill these jobs. If you want a leadership position in an organization, most of them are going to require a PhD. But I see more and more ads saying minimum qualifications will be masters, because I think they're realizing there's not enough people to fill these jobs. I just did an interview for one of our doc students. She just got a job at a certification organization. They were trying to fill that job for over a year. So they didn't have anybody overseeing their certification exams for over a year, which is kind of scary. But these organizations are going to have to quickly realize that not everybody's going to be able to hire a PhD level psychometrician, because there's just not enough of them out there.
Right. And I would say that for the vast majority of the work that we do, so we have an entire assessment division, and they do these large-scale state assessments. Most of what we do is around surveys or observational measures. We do some custom-built assessments for a specific project. Okay, so if someone's developing a 8th grade physics intervention where, there's iPads involved to learn about force and et cetera, they're developing a custom assessment to look at, very small scale, almost like a lab experiment if something's working. So there's some psychometrics with that. But most of what we do is survey research, where we have rating scales on a survey, and we're looking to see, have we developed the reliable and a measure that has evidence of its validity. And the rating scale design and analysis course here, do you still teach that? All right, so that course is completely sufficient to be able to do 95% of the work related to that. I mean, it's a great course.
I could have known that. You could have told me that a while ago.
Yeah.
That's on your promotional materials.
Yep. I mean, obviously you need to be well-rounded, but that course is very good in terms of developing surveys and checking the validity of them.
And if you're interested in AIR, there is a Chicago area AIR, and they meet, you just Google it, you'll find them.
This is a different organization. Everyone always confuses it.
Oh, is it this?
So AIR is American Institutes for Research.
Oh, and I'm talking about There's also
The Association of Institutional Researchers.
Yeah.
AirWeb. That's the
Yeah.
that's the job. That's
Maybe
the site that
why
posts the
it's
jobs.
AIR and AIR.
Yeah, Eb thought that we were the same thing for years.
Still will. Questions for Andrew? I mean, he's worn multiple hats. He's one of those folks that backed into the field. I remember the colleague that he's talking about asked me to fly up to Alaska to do the standard setting for, I forgot what exams we did up there.
All of them.
Oh, we did all of them.
It was 24
Beautiful
assessments.
area. If you
We were
have
there
a
for a
chance to
week.
Go to Alaska, go up there.
In May.
Just expect to be up all day because it's sun's up all the time there. But that's where I met Andrew, and he says I recruited him. I think he just kind of fell into our lap, and we were fortunate enough.
Yeah.
So questions for Andrew? Licensure certification, AIR? Yeah.
Are you each involved in a full-time endeavor for either a philanthropic or not-for-profit organization, or do you all perform external evaluations as consultants for folks?
Well, I'll answer first since I've told you what I do. Most other folks have a variety of fields that they're in. So I really don't do anything on the side because of, well, I have to fill out paperwork if I moonlight because turns out most of what I know how to do, my organization knows how to do, so I'd be in direct competition with them. So no, but I have done some stuff on the side. Very small scale, though. I wouldn't do an evaluation on the side.
Not that he could talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk later, off camera.
Something else for Andrew? 'Cause I know you have to leave early too, don't you?
Yeah, I thought this only went till 5, sorry.
Yeah, they switched our schedule. We used to be.
3:45 to 5, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Who's up next? Ken? Is that Ken down there? Yeah. Nice seeing you.
Hi, I'm Ken Fujimoto, and I'm a assistant professor at Loyola University School of Education in the program of research methodology. So I teach I teach the measurement courses and introductory level stat courses and research method courses there, and I do research on measurement models, item response theory models, and more specifically in assessing cluster effects and multidimensional RT models. And then and then another large part of the job is lots of meetings. So lots of committee and faculty meetings, things like that. So I think my job is pretty straightforward. Nothing interesting like the other two. So it's pretty straightforward. And I ended up there because obviously from a program, but what Eva was talking about, people back into things and stuff like that. I actually started the program wanting to go into program evaluation. So it was just, but then while I was here, I ended up becoming much more interested in measurement. So then what happened was, and the statistical modeling of measurement-related issues. And so then it became more, I originally started with program evaluation. I backed into program evaluation, and then I ended up backing into becoming specialized in measurement and the mathematical aspects of measurement. And so then it was just, and now I have a position teaching it. So that's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Is there any research project you are working on?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things, with academia, we do, it's not like, I don't really do applied work. And so it's like, I show some of the assumptions, that many item response theory models make within the multidimensional framework. I show that, they make assumptions because of, mathematical like identification problems, stuff like that. But I work to relax those assumptions and show how conclusions can change by making those assumptions. So a lot of the current software, a lot of the practices that make those assumptions, they could be actually leading to misleading conclusions, stuff like that, right? So I work on those kinds of things. I don't have, it's not like the other two where they have this project where it's like with people, you know, like, and so it's like a lot of people don't ask me that question, I guess. So I work on the actual models and how I show how, a lot of the assumptions that are made could lead to faulty conclusions, I guess I should say. I look for the ones where the conclusions change, not like, I don't look for where, assumptions, you relax an assumption and things change a little bit, but still same conclusion. I look for, I work on the stuff where, or at least I try to. I'm not always right, but, and so I have a couple things with multidimensionality and cluster effects right now that I'm working on. And the other part is I work on another challenge, and this part is from when I've worked with people, with colleagues and stuff like that in the applied sector where they deal with people, but a lot of times they want to, like Andrew was talking about, they want to assess the quality of the data from an instrument. And so one of the things is, with AIR, they get to collect large number of data, and most of the people I work with in psychology and things like that, in social sciences and education in general, they get like 100 to 200 people of data. But yet they measure things that are highly complicated dimensional structure, because humans, that's how we think, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you confirm, or how do you study the dimensional structure of these complex multi-dimensional structures and data from sample sizes as small as like 100 or 200, right? And so I work, and so one other area of work right now I'm doing is working on how you could test very complicated multi-dimensional structures in very small sample sizes, and showing that it can be done. So yeah, so my thing doesn't deal with people, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think Ken's representing obviously that academic aspect. So for those that want to go into academia, they're more behind than corporations. Corporations are now more accepting of master's level Mesa students. Academia, you need the PhD.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you shouldn't even bother applying, at least at Division I research institutions. I know several of our students that have faculty positions, but it might be at a D3 school or something else, but not at a Division I school where you, just out of tradition, you have to have a PhD to get into this kind of field.
And then to build on that too, if you do want to go into academia, assistant professor, or tenure track position, yeah, it's getting to the point where you have to have at least one, if not two, publications for first authors, preferably. Like to be actually, competitive, right? And so start early. Like I tell my students when they're thinking about it, a lot of times dissertation, and they think they're going to publish a dissertation, and that will be something. But when you're dissertating, you're also applying for the jobs. Mm-hmm. So your dissertation isn't going to be in press, right? And so it's part of the thing. And I know part of coming to this program, I know through you, I got opportunities to co-author a lot of papers, right, and stuff like that. But then, like that transition, and I had George, I think my advisor, and so got to, and he pushed and says, okay, now time for first author, and so and then, so before I graduated, it was like, but you kind of have to have that because it's if you don't, it makes it harder. It's not impossible, but makes it harder, and that's the one thing that is seeming, and you could probably attest to this a little bit more, but more the expectation for tenure track positions now is that even
I mean,
it's expected.
We've had most of the folks that come into the master's program, they don't have any intention going on for a PhD. Right. The few that have wanted to, and I've written letters for, they've gotten into some of the better programs, Ohio State, UNC Chapel, I believe. So having a master's in Mesa really preps you quite well if you want to go on for the PhD. Yeah. But in my experience, we typically have two types of PhD students. ones that want to go into academia, like Ken did. So Ken was willing to stay on an RA kind of salary, so poverty level type of salary, for 4 or 5 years, because he knows he's got to publish, he's got to try to write some grants or get his name on some grants in order to get that assistant level professor position. The other type of doc students that we have, they come in, they get 2 years worth of education, then they can go out to the private sector making more than I do. And then they finish, like Andrew did. And then it takes 10 years to finish his PhD. But he finished. But those are the two types of students. One's, for those that want to go into academia, you got to stay in-house so you can get your pubs. That's the best way to do it. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely difficult.
And I think that's only going to increase because there are more and more schools because the federal government and the state governments aren't funding higher education in the ways that they used to.
Right.
They're cutting back by cutting back on full-time faculty and tenure-line faculty. I know at, I can't say this officially, it's being recorded, but at Depaul, it feels like there's been more of a, to save money, departments have been forced to hire more adjuncts rather than hiring full-time tenure-track faculty.
But building on what Ev said, you have a great point in that the master's program, what you actually learn, if you go on to the PhD program, it like sets you up where you can be an RA and at least be co-authoring right from the start of first year of your PhD program, and then hopefully you stay in the lab, and then second year or third year you get access to your data to try to get your first author things. But I would have to say, and what Andrew was saying about that one class, the measurement class and stuff like that, and so like many of the classes really made it easy to transition into working on projects. So.
I think what distinguishes our master's program from a lot of others is our master's students you're just taking the doctoral courses, except the doctoral students just have to take more of them. So you're taking doctoral level courses in a master's level program, and so the feedback. And it's always unsolicited because I never go out and seek the feedback. But the feedback I get from students that just email me are very appreciative of the skills they get because when they get to the workforce, their employers appreciate what they already know. So it's good to hear.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's like, it helped me, right? So, and so, but then also, if you do, so I know what you're talking about in terms of, RA. You live in poverty, and then when you graduate, and then you see other people going to testing companies or medical centers, and you go into academia, you see, and they tell you what their salaries are, and then so
sort of depressing.
Even though you're in faculty and you're no longer on the RA ship, you're still like, okay, I'm still behind.
Yeah, one area that we don't have represented up here this year is the healthcare and the medical field. There are tons of positions in healthcare as well for measurement and stat folks. So that's one area that unfortunately I couldn't get our usual guy here to talk about that, but that's one area where there's other job opportunities. Questions for Ken? Any or other questions for Ken? Thanks, Ken. Next is Erica. Erica has the distinction of being one of our very, very first doc students, if I recall.
I think I might also have the distinction of having the record, right, for the longest
I don't know.
time.
You were Andrew, man. You were Andrew.
So I took my first class in 2001, and I defended my dissertation in February of 2014. So that's how long I was here. Yeah. So, and I echo what Andrew says, get it done. It's really, if you are employed full-time while you're doing this program, it is hard to write the dissertation. The classes are a lot easier because that's a structured time when you go after work to get your classes done. Once I finished the classes pretty easily. It was the dissertation. And I also had 2 children during the time that I was trying to do the dissertation, which I wouldn't also recommend trying to pile all that on at the same time. But so I guess how I came to this field was also by accident. I graduated undergrad with a degree in psychology and sociology. I thought I wanted to be a therapist, a psychologist. And, but I was broke, and I decided I better go out and get a job for a few years and save money and maybe, you know, take 2 or 3 years and then go to grad school. And so one of the first jobs I got, it was about 10 months out of college, I was hired by Riverside Publishing Company, which is an educational test publisher, and they have at the time had a real small clinical psychological testing division or department. And so I was hired there, and because I had been an editor for a journal in college, I had some editorial skills, and that's how I got into that company. But it was just sort of ironic that I was hired in the clinical testing area, and I had an interest in psychology. So I worked there as an editor for a couple of years, and then decided that it was time to go back to grad school. The company was going to help me pay for that. My boss at the time, who became one of my career mentors, said, you know, you should really think about school psychology. So most of the products that we published were for the school psychology market. And so I went and took one class, a very first class in cognitive assessment, and we had a guest speaker come in one night, kind of like a thing like this, where we had people come in from different areas of the university, and this person came in and talked about item response theory and measurement models, and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I don't want to be a therapist. I don't want to be a school psychologist. I want to do that. And so luckily for me, the company that I worked for supported that, because we employed psychometricians and measurement professionals. So I was sort of able to just kind of fall into this field while maintaining my same full-time career. So I worked at Riverside for a number of years, and worked primarily on psychological assessments and developmental assessments. So think IQ tests, tests that are given to, our market was mostly children in schools, but these tests are also used for adults, and they go basically from age 2 to 90. And so at the end of the day, what I work on is actually a project, a product that gets published and sold. And the 2 batteries that I worked on the most are administered to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people per year. So they're very widely used and well known in the school market. So I guess the way that this degree has really helped me through that is, one, is that there aren't, if you have any interest in going into psychological assessment, very few psychometricians in this field, very few people with measurement degrees. Most of the people are psychologists. Most of the people designing and developing and doing all of the measurement work on most psychological assessments are psychologists who may have had a little bit of quantitative experience or training, but they're really, from what I've seen, very few people who are trained in measurement and developing psychological assessment. So it's a very rare skill set, and I think it's been really helpful to me. The other thing I would recommend is I've been really fortunate to have some amazing mentors. Some of my mentors are the thought leaders in the field of school psychology, and so those are the people who've really helped me make some big decisions about what it is I want to do and what do I need to focus on, what skills do I need to have to be able to achieve my career goals, and also those are people who have given me opportunities to learn from them and to work with them, so that when it comes time to graduate and find your job, or even after you've been working for a number of years to find your next job, it really helps to, as somebody earlier said, to network and to know people and to just have developed those professional relationships. So in May of this past year, I left Riverside and took a position at Northwestern University as a research assistant professor. So unlike Ken, I'm not a tenure track. I'm not doing any teaching. I'm just doing research, which is really cool because it's kind of like I'm doing test development, but in an academic environment. So in my old world, I had publishing deadlines and schedules and revenue goals, and we have to get this test out by this time so that we can achieve our revenue goals for the year. And sometimes that is a little hard when you're trying to do best practice and trying to make the best decisions about measurement and making sure that you're doing things the right way and in technically sound ways. And so I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just saying that puts a lot of stress on you when you really want to make the best product possible, but you're being told that you have to do it by this time and with this much money. And so it's really neat being in an academic environment where there aren't necessarily those kinds of constraints. There's a lot more freedom for creativity and being able to think about what kinds of assessments you want to develop and to actually come up with some of your own ideas for assessments. So the work I do at Northwestern is really grant funded, and we are the measurement core, or the measurement core for a very large NIH grant that's looking at health outcomes for children. And so most of the research and measurement tools that are being used in this grant and being administered to children and families all over the country come from the group that I work with at Northwestern. So a lot of those instruments are patient-reported outcome measures or surveys about different health things and anxiety and emotional quality of life kinds of things. And then there's a whole set of tools that are cognition, so looking at executive function and memory and vocabulary and those kinds of constructs. So really those are primarily the ones that I work on. And really it's a lot of what I did for the private commercial test publisher. It's just doing that in a different setting.
Cool, I didn't know about the Northwestern until I had contacted you.
Yeah.
So that's nice move. Questions for Erica? Either private sector, academic?
I would also echo what Andrew said, just the rating scale class, even though I don't haven't done a lot of work in rating scale instruments, survey instruments, just the measurement principles that you get in that class, and also the intro measurement and all the Roche classes were super helpful. And something else I can say, just having been in my field for over 20 years, when people find out that I went to UIC, they know that you know the Roche model. That's a very so I think it's a good thing. I think the school has a really good reputation for being one of the preeminent places to come if you want to learn measurement and Roche. So.
Well, it's good to hear, because I haven't heard that.
Yeah, you say, oh, he went to UIC, oh, you're, you know Roche then. That's, so.
Be better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Questions? Yep.
I have a quick one. How's the quality of life changed for you going from corporate to academic?
You know what, it's nice. It's good. So my commute quadrupled, right? Because I was 10 miles from home, and now I'm the building that I work in is on Michigan Avenue in the city. So I live out in the suburbs. So I telecommute a few days a week, and then I go in a couple days a week. But no, it's been good. I like it. It's a very different environment, but all good.
You give up money but gain time.
Yep.
Freedom. True. But it's grant funded, so you have to periodically reapply.
So my situation's a little different because the grant that I'm on is so large and it's multi-year, and so so I'm not actually in a position right now of having to go out and find my own grant money. I work for somebody who does most of that, and then
that's nice.
It's nice, it's nice because I'm not coming from this environment. So the grant-funded thing is a huge learning curve for me. People talk about things, and it's like a whole language that I don't know, having come from the private sector for 20 years. So, yeah.
Something else? No? Thank you, Erica. I appreciate you coming in. Next up is Jen.
Okay, my name is Jen Sweet. I'm the Director of Assessment at Depaul University, just up the street here. I don't know, I got into it really because I was torn. I really liked science and math, but I really liked working with people. And I sort of I lived in that. When I got my master's degree, I got it in student personnel, so sort of people side of it. But I took all the PhD level stats classes because I still really liked the math and stats side of it. So that program was a 3-year program, so it was 2 years of coursework and 1 year of internship. So I thought, I should do an internship in institutional research, and my advisor was like, you don't want that. She's like, you don't want to do that. I'm going to put you in the assessment office instead. So I didn't even know it was a thing. And then I went and worked there, and I was like, oh, this is sort of perfect. Because in assessment, you work heavily with people, but you also work heavily with numbers and statistics and math and that side of things that I really like.
You're talking about the assessment office here, right?
No.
Was it that at UIC the first one?
I worked here,
right,
but full-time. I didn't do it. Okay. My internship was at Oklahoma State University. So then my first job, I got sort of director of administration and assessment for the res ed program here. And then I moved into the academic office here for Office of Programs and Academic Assessment here. And then I moved to Depaul. where I started as associate director and then moved up to director this past summer. So for me, there's just no better job. I really, and I know some people who do this who hate it because they don't like the people side, or some people who hate it because they're not crazy about the numbers side. So you sort of have to have a passion for both and an ability to, no offense to the faculty in the room, to work with some difficult people.
I don't think we work with difficult people.
I mean, faculty are sort of attracted to that job because they're very autonomous. They like to do their own thing, and they like to sort of be the expert, right? So they don't appreciate always being sort of having suggestions given to them about what they should do or how they should do it. But I always had sort of a gift for working with difficult people. I never like some people who like the bosses that everyone hated. I loved them generally because they were blunt, and I liked blunt people. Like, I'd rather you just tell me, So if you sort of really enjoy working with people, and this might be the field for you, I would agree with what everyone else said. The class I use more than anything is that 503. It's probably a different number now, but the
intro stats.
Rating scale.
Oh, the 503.
Yeah, I didn't take intro stats. I had that covered.
Okay.
but yeah, sort of that rating scale development, I learned more probably in that class than in a lot of others. And then I took a lot of like Bayesian, different models learning. So I would say that, first of all, this is a very employable field. Tons of jobs in assessment because every single university has to have at least one person who does what I do, and most will have more than one person who does what I do. So you get on the assess listserv, and you'll see just all the jobs coming through. It's like 10, 12 a day.
Well, that's not just at the university level, is it? I mean, colleges all have to have an assessment or institutional office. Community
Yes.
colleges all have one as well.
Yeah, every single
School districts typically have
university.
one.
Yep.
Right.
And oftentimes, specific, like the medical department here has their own assessment people. Pharmacy has their own assessment people. So you can even get down into specific fields. And oftentimes those people come from our background. They're not pharmacists. Because if you're a pharmacist, generally you don't want to go into assessment of pharmacy. So they tend to come out of this broader assessment field. So many of the jobs are in higher education because every single college is required to do it. Every single program at every single institution is required to assess. And what I really like about it is I've always been I like puzzles. I like figuring stuff out. So to me, every single person that comes to me, like I always say, like, you can't come to me with a problem I can't solve. I will figure out a way for you to measure it in the way you want to measure it that will be valuable to you and your faculty. And that's a lot of what I do. I work with faculty. I sort of beg, borrow, and steal all these different measurement models. I'll go anywhere I have to go to figure out how to do it in the way they want to. Like, one of the first issues I ran into at Depaul was our international studies program. They didn't want to define outcomes. Because they said, so much of what we do, the outcomes sort of develop. And we don't want to take away from that, right? By defining something. So I went out into the evaluation field. I found Michael Scriven's goal-free assessment, and sort of used that model to develop an assessment methodology that they could then use. That those faculty members weren't happy with me. They sort of, I think, ultimately wanted a pass. Like, okay, that's it. You're the one field that can't do it.
I think Jen's right there. I mean, it goes by different names, institutional research or assessment offices, everything from community colleges all the way up to D1 schools, large school districts like CPS. They have a whole army of stat and measurement psychometricians. I think that's the one field that has the most job openings is IR or assessment offices.
Yeah, and there's tons of need because there's not a lot of people who are trained to do this sort of work. I write a lot of reports. I help faculty write a lot of reports. I don't know. And I also, the good thing is I started out in education. I have a degree in education. I was going to teach, and then I decided like I would go crazy teaching the exact same curriculum year after year after year to high school students.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, so I decided that's probably not for me, but now I get to teach in my role. So I teach adjunct, and I actually, one of the projects I recently completed is I developed a new course. We have a first year course at Depaul. It's called Discover, Explore Chicago. So it's curriculum, cohort-based class for new freshmen. Every new freshman has to take one of these classes. And the first time I taught in it, I was looking at I was running down all the different things, and I realized there was not a single math class. The whole thing, there was no math. And I was like, and so it took me several years of going around and talking to the stats department and the math department and trying to figure out, like, why? And some people said, well, there's a gen ed requirement for math. And I was like, there's a gen ed requirement for lots of things, that they still have these courses. Like, why wouldn't you? So I developed a course called Chicago by the Numbers that really focuses on numerical literacy and teaching students what numbers mean and what they don't mean, and how the media uses numbers to deceive us, and how they should be more critical of what they're reading. And
Yeah, we had a course on the books, and actually Ken, I think, was when he was a young doc student, we were going to have him teach. It was going to be a gen ed course, but our title was going to be lying with statistics and how to catch others. And,
I remember that.
yeah,
similar
we had the
title.
syllabus and everything. That was going to be an interesting course, because stats don't lie. It's the people that manipulate them that lie. So that would be an interesting course, but it sounds
Well,
like
actually, it was in the, what's it called, the Mesa lab?
Yep.
Where I found the book that I used for that class. It was just lying around, so I was like, it's called The Numbers Game.
That's where.
And I was like, no, I didn't
I
steal
know.
it. So I ordered it online and read it, and I was like, this would be a perfect gen ed class.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you're doing it. We might have to revive that here at some point.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good luck.
I won't be teaching it. I have too much on my plate. Question? Yeah, please.
I don't know if this question should be directed towards you, but what you were saying reminded me of what many of our professors have told us, and that's one of the biggest struggles is matching up our research question with the type of method that's going to actually answer the question. And it sounds like that's what you provide that advice for faculty, and I'm just curious, who does that for doc students? Would it be their advisor? Would it be?
Generally, you work with your advisor on that, yeah.
It sounds like what you're doing is really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because, some faculty, they get very annoyed with me because they say, what instrument, like, should I use, how should, and I say, well, what do you want to know? And they're like, well, what do you mean what I want to know, Because you have to get at the, like, instruments aren't good at serving more than one master. So just recently somebody said, I want to use this because it's valid. And I was like, in what context, right? Because something that's valid for one purpose in one context isn't necessarily valid for every purpose in every context. So I have a lot of conversations like that too.
Well, that's where the abuse comes in. So tests designed to assess achievement should not be used to, in my opinion, assess teacher competence or teacher effectiveness, because that's not what they're designed for. But that doesn't stop people.
Yeah, so, and in my role, I work with academic program review, which is a form of evaluation.
So a lot of hats. We wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, and that's, to me, exciting. I love doing all that stuff. I love getting involved in all of this stuff. And to me, this is just very exciting. I think it's the best job there is, so you should all do it. So if you are interested in this, or maybe potentially interested in this, I would recommend several things. First, there is a local community of practice that's open to anyone. Sometimes students are intimidated to come in, but you shouldn't be. Come on in, join us. It's the Chicago Area Assessment Group, CAAG. You can just Google that, and you'll find the meetings. Our next meeting is December 7th.
And I think for
That's
anybody
Friday.
living in a medium or large-sized city, you're going to have a group like that as
Yeah.
well. So for those of you watching out there,
Yeah.
Google your own city and you'll find something very similar.
Yeah, I'd recommend attending those sorts. One, it's a great way to network, to meet people, to ask questions. Everyone there, I mean, they're there because they want to share, they want to get ideas, they love talking to students, and people interested in the field. So it's a great way to network. It's a great way to understand what are the conversations that are happening and get a better sense for, like, maybe I might be interested in that job, but you get a better sense of what that, because what the job is for me might be slightly different than what the job is for someone else, because depending on the institution you go to, it's sort of the responsibilities can change. So I definitely recommend that. Also, we have a national organization called the Association for Assessment of Learning in Higher Education, AALHE. And that does a really nice conference every year. This year it's in, this next June, it's going to be in Minneapolis. And they offer really cheap student registration. I think it's going up this year, but in the past it's been $75 to register. And being in Minneapolis, that's like a, you could probably find a $69 flight up there, on Southwest. So I would definitely recommend that. They also offer scholarships to graduate students. You have to apply for them, but we don't have all that many people that apply every year. So generally, we're able to fund most of the people who apply. Don't quote me on that, because I can't guarantee that nothing would change. But it's definitely worth it to try. Generally, those scholarships include some sort of service, like you have to volunteer at the registration desk or something like that, but then that helps offset the cost. So it's a great way to just explore the field. It's a great way to network again.
Yeah.
Most of the big names in assessment tend to be there, and they tend to get big name speakers too for their keynotes.
Some other questions for Jen? Assessment office, IR office in general? Yeah. Thanks, Jen. John?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Jungmi Skulis. I'm a clinical assistant professor and assessment coordinator at the UIC library. I started my PhD program in the educational psychology, specializing in human development learning. I earned my PhD May this year, and also I concurrently earned my Master's of Education in Mesa program. So how I got this field was, since I graduated recently, I would like to share some of my experience, how I look for the jobs. When I was in the PhD program, I didn't determine I wanted to be in academia, so I didn't focus on honestly publications. By the time I finished my draft of my dissertation, I realized I have to look for a job. And at the time, it was late because I have to look for a job, but I don't have a publications. So, but I still wanted to go to the faculty position, so I looked for the faculty positions in like teaching colleges. At the same time, I wanted to be a researcher, so I also look for the AIR and other like charter school programs for the as a researcher. And also I experienced working as the instructional designer because I experienced teaching in online courses. So I was very interested in developing those online courses. So if I couldn't get any jobs that I wanted, I would also wanted to go to the field of as an instructional designer. So bottom line, how I get this position is it is not what I wanted to be. However, I wanted to be a researcher. The more I look for the job description, when they mention about we require both quantitative and qualitative skills, then I feel very confident. So I applied regardless of the field. I never experienced actually the library. And as a student, I borrowed a book, I used the library space, that is it. But I've never learned any knowledge about how the library system works. It is a very, very complex word. And then without the library,
Card catalog.
yes. So actually, without the library degree, it's really, in my case, it was very exceptional because library, even though they have the Masters of a Library degree, but they want to have the people who outside of the library have a very strong qualitative and qualitative skills. So that's why I think, oh, this is really good place that I can work. So by the time I finished my first draft of my dissertation, that I started looking for a job. So that was the November, last year November. And I was looking for other jobs, and around the March, I saw this job opening at the UIC. And then at the time, I also knew that who actually worked there, and it was the former PhD student from the educational psychology. So she left, and then that's why there is a job opening. Who is laughing? Okay, so is that funny? Okay, so that's why when I looked at the job description, they require like a library experience, but I ignored that. I wanted to emphasize my strength of the library, both quantitative and qualitative skills. And in that case, the Masters of the measurement, the Mesa program, the Mesa degree was very helpful because they know about the reputation of the Mesa program. My supervisor already completed the Mesa, so she knew that this is very strong skills. So I think they already have a lot of candidates, but they know that any students from Mesa program, they have the very strong quantitative skills. So I think that'll be the benefit. So given that this is the faculty position, I had to go through like one day the interviews, including the presentation about the assessment. So what I want to emphasize from you start the PhD program or Mesa program, build experience. Just do not limit yourself, oh, I'm going to be a faculty. I want to only focus on publication. Who knows? I was very skeptical because people who ended up getting no job and just having a part-time job over year and over year. So that actually made me think about what I'm going to do after I graduate. So that's why I was very apply all kinds of jobs. So currently, my primary responsibility is to conducting student survey. I think some of you already stay in the UIC earlier this year. You received a student survey from the library. Like this kind of library resources or services we provide, how can we improve? So what I'm doing right now is analyzing those data, writing the report, and presenting about the findings to the stakeholders. And also we are developing the questionnaires for the faculty survey that we are going to distribute to the next year's spring. And also I got involved with the strategic planning, so working with the senior staff. So as also I was the chair of the Assessment Advisory Committee. So whenever you work something, creating the questionnaires, you need some support from other people, different perspectives. So we actually form a committee developing those kind of questions and preparing for the IRB materials and writing the reports. So another part that as a new student, I would like to encourage you to take advantage of not only about the taking statistical courses as well, but also taking any professional development workshops, especially data visualization. When you look at the job description, you will know that they require data visualization. You have a wonderful data analysis. This is the report. How are you going to communicate about the findings to convince your stakeholders? So those are the very important. And also, if you're available, attend the job talk. You never know. You may have to end up going to the faculty position, and you have to talk about your dissertation and your work. How are you going to communicate with your audience? So those are the things that I developed during the PhD program. And also, thanks to the Mesa program, I was able to get my internship position at the YMCA as a program evaluator. So people who actually, like us, already got a job, we established this kind of a good reputation. That's why we have like a very strong responsibility. We have to maintain this kind of a reputation. And then later, any students from our program wanting to get a job, then I think Andrew mentioned about the network. They know who we are, so that's why they can actually recommend, oh, I have a student from the Mesa program so-and-so, what do you think? And they can actually connect that way. They don't just hire because of you have these skills of publication, but they wanted to have some kind of some network who they are. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you.
And I'm glad that you were able to come because when I started the Mesa program, we were, over the years, because I review all the applications, there were several people, they said they're librarians. And I was like, are they applying to the right program? And I didn't know that there was so much assessment that goes on in the library.
Yes.
So we've had a few of these folks come in throughout the years, and then having spoken to some of the folks that have been applying for these positions, I'm like, well, they know all the quant skills, but they don't know anything about the library. As long as you're willing to teach them about the library, they have the quant stuff down.
Right. And then,
Is
right.
that what they've done with you as well?
Yes. So librarians, some of the, like, depending on the size of the school, like a community college, it's hard for them to recruit the new person like outside of the librarianship. So that's why, but in other words, it's hard for them actually analyze because they are not trained to analyze those very heavy quantitative or qualitative data. They just like the statistical courses is just one of the course among the library degree. So it is not strong at all compared to us. We have a PhD as well as the Masters of the Masters of the Mesa program. So it's very different skills, and now they were willing to hire. And I would like to say that this is very, very unusual that most of the librarians you see as a faculty, they do not have a PhD. There are few, including me, there are few have a PhD. They still are faculty. So when you see, that is very exceptional. So if you're really interested into going to the library field, you can be a faculty without the PhD, as long as if you have the Mesa degree.
I mean, before we open it up for questions for Jung, I think she represents probably about 10 or 15% of our population who are PhD students in another field. So, but they're simultaneously getting a master's in Mesa, so they're willing to be poor for an extra year, year and a half. But then when they get out to the job market, if you're applying, let's say you got a PhD in SPED or policy or curriculum instruction, but you also have a master's in Mesa, and it's going to come down to another person that just has a degree in CNI, or you who has CNI and Mesa, and you're applying for a research kind of position, there's not even going to be any debate. So if you're willing to sacrifice for that extra year, year and a half, you're going to have much broader career potential when you get a master's as well as your doctorate. So about 10-15% of our entire enrollment is probably PhD students in other fields that are simultaneously getting their master's in Mesa.
Right, that is true. I think Rebecca mentioned about that when you take a statistical courses, quantitative courses, do not limit yourself that, oh, this is my interest. I'm very good at quantitative skills. Quantitative research, but never look at the quantitative. No, you never know that you are going to use. I think it's very different that you can take courses, but you don't have to use it. That's the difference. You can selectively choose as long as you have the knowledge, but do not limit yourself that this is not an interest, I never take it. And then later, by the time you have to use it, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have those skills.
Then you gotta come back as a non-degree student.
Yeah.
Take other classes.
So, like, one thing, if you can't do the, this is the Mesa program, but at least take a ERM, just take only 2 or 3 courses. How many courses?
Well, it's Jung's talking about the certificate. Which is
certificate, or even if do we still have the survey certificate from the public health? Take advantage of those kind of a certificate. When you work this kind of like assessment, you will conduct a lot of surveys, and then by having those kind of skills, it's beneficial. They will not go away, and that will be good for your resume as well. So when you're in the UIC, take advantage of a lot of certificates.
Any questions? No questions. Library sciences, being a PhD student.
Depaul also has an assessment staff for the library.
Yeah. No, I think all the larger universities, and that's something I learned because when we first started Mesa, I had no idea that there was that much assessment going on at libraries.
Do you know Ashley?
No, but I know that someone actually coming from Depaul, the library.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, we've lost a ton of people lately.
Hi everyone. So I'm the last person here. I'm going to try and keep it straightforward, but if you have questions, please ask. I'm currently in a very traditional academic position. It is my first semester as a tenure track assistant professor of psychology at Dominican University in River Forest. I just graduated this summer, so. So I'm hoping kind of to give you a little bit of information about what it was like navigating this field and going through the PhD program and then landing where I am right now. I do have my PhD was in human development and learning. I did not get a master's or a PhD in Mesa, but I did really pad on as many quant classes as I possibly could. I think I took 3 with Dr. Smith and then several HLM and all of those courses that I possibly could. And I think that's been a huge factor in where I was right now, but I'll get to that in a minute. Although I'm in a very traditional role, I kind of got here in a very zigzag manner. So I'm originally from India. We came to the US about 15 years back. I came with a bachelor's and a master's in business and economics, so that did have a certain amount of math and stats already. However, I knew that's not something I wanted to do. Accounting was deadly boring. And so I decided to, I had been teaching all my life since I was 18, and so that's where my background is. So I did my master's in teaching at Dominican University, actually, where I'm teaching now, which was great. However, after finishing and graduating, because I still didn't have a green card, I wasn't allowed to work, which means I was home with a little kid and going out of my mind. And so my advisor at Dominican, who was doing research at that point, asked if I'd like to kind of assist her. I said, yes, I'll do anything to get out of the house. And so I was immersed in this big ethnographic study, working in a lot of the CPS schools, and which was intensive, which was a lot of observations, a lot of interviews with not just the students, but teachers, community members, all of that. It was an absolutely exhilarating experience. And that sort of opened up this idea of, yes, teaching is something that I really, really want to do, but hey, research is awesome too. And so it kind of, the next logical step was let's explore PhD programs and what they have to offer. I had a lot of conversations with a lot of professors just randomly messaging and saying, can I come and talk to you? Terry was one of them. And just trying to get a sense of what that entails, which ultimately landed me here at UIC. Early on, the next step was then deciding where do I want this program to go. Am I thinking about R1 institutions, which was going to require all of these publications and all of a whole different skill set? Am I looking at more teaching universities, which is where my background and my passion lied? Or I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial bug, which hasn't gone away yet. Or is that where I want to go? I was fortunate that at UIC, in the very first year, I was given the opportunity to teach as an instructor on record because of all the teaching experience that I had had, and because of that teaching degree that I had had. Since then, for the next 4 to 5 years, I constantly taught, sometimes a couple of courses as well, but always under the advisement of Terry and everyone. What that allowed me to do was really immerse myself in working with a lot of undergraduates. So I taught, I also kind of helped with designing a program for teaching assistants within the educational psychology department. And so there was a lot of teaching involved, working one-on-one with students as well. And so by my second year, I had figured out that my goal was going to be to go to a teaching university. That's where I wanted to be. And as much as I loved research and I wanted to continue doing that, my next challenge was to find a place that kind of would value both equally, or maybe teaching a little bit more, but that was the big challenge. That's why I feel really comfortable where I am right now, because this particular university, the first thing they asked me when I was interviewing was, we're looking for somebody who has a 60-40 focus, 60 teaching, 40 research. And I said, yes, I didn't know that, exactly. So that's where I feel like I really fit in. So the way I got the job, typically the way it worked, was because I wanted to explore where I was going to go, and I didn't have a very set plan. I also immersed myself with APA to a great extent. And that's something that I would really recommend you do as a graduate student, not just APA, but find those communities that you're talking about, right? Because I was in human development and learning, and educational psychology, that was my base. So Division 15 became my base. I worked quite a bit in Division 15, getting to network with several faculty members from all across the nation. Got into their sort of mentoring program where I got to kind of work with all of these different individuals who were within my field of interest, which was cooperative and collaborative learning. So that sort of opened doors to understanding what it's like to be at an R1 institution or what it's like to be at a teaching institution and why these things are different. And then networking with several other grad students who were at the same phase as me, and seeing where they were going, and then talking to them and seeing what's it like working in the small university where you are designing a lot of the courses, where the program is emerging versus what's it like to be at this R1 university. I think that was incredibly helpful. Even within APA, the APA GS, which is the APA graduate student group, is a very, very strong place to be, or at least to start with networking, because they really do a lot of this work in helping you network and helping you build your skills in many different areas. So that kind of exposed me to a lot of different things and helped me understand where I want to be. So at Dominican, I was particularly given this job because they'd been looking for somebody to sort of coordinate their developmental psych part of psychology. That's where I fit in because of my human development and learning background. They were particularly looking for somebody who had very strong teaching experience. So of course I had my teaching degree, I had the teaching work that I had done at UIC, but realize that if your goal is to be at a teaching university, they're not just looking for quantity, right? They're not just looking for people who have taught a lot. It's really, really important that you're building that teaching portfolio like you would anywhere else. And that portfolio involves really being able to show evidence that you are committed to working with students, in this case undergrads, because that's the department at Dominican, and to their success, whether it's one-on-one or otherwise, right? So I was able to demonstrate that because of, yes, of course, the courses I had taught and the diversity in those courses, but also because of things like teaching awards, which were on campus. I had an on-campus teaching award, I had a Midwest teaching award, all of those things, simply because that showed that I was committed to teaching and to working with students. And that's something they were really, really looking for. They had been looking for someone to fill this position for over a year. And that's when we're not really getting that kind of person who they were looking for. And so that's when they opened it up to ABD. And that's when they contacted Terry and asked if she knew anyone. She forwarded asked me if I was interested. I applied, and that's how things went. So I was fortunate that happened because I literally interviewed for the job 2 weeks before I defended my dissertation, which is a good place to be, a little scary and exciting place to be, but a good place to be. And that was an added motivation to get it done. Or I might still be kind of pushing it. But it was good, and that's how things worked out. The second reason why they hired me, what they told me, was the quantitative base. The reason for that was because the undergrad psychology program has a very, very strong focus on quantitative methodology. So there is a 2 to 4 course core statistics program, the core that they have, which every student has to take. And I'm just learning about it because I'm going to be teaching one of their classes next semester. But it's literally starts with what's confidence intervals and goes to mediation, moderation, and these are undergrads who are doing all of these things. So it really has a strong focus on that. Being on this panel is kind of opening my mind to thinking about, because we're so committed to thinking about where can these undergraduates go, this is really helping me think about, okay, what are the options for them if they are really in that quant mindset, right? So that's something that they should be thinking about and be exposed to, something that many of you mentioned early on as well, is that exposure of what is out there and what is available. I think that's something that I'm going to have to work towards. So I think being on this panel is a great experience for me right now. But if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions? I want to bring up because we've covered a lot of different fields here, but there's some areas out there that we haven't covered, and I just want to bring them up so folks are aware that these opportunities do exist. I mean, at the state level, you obviously have state boards of education. They always have positions open for assessment people, psychometricians, statisticians, assessment folks. At the federal level, there's positions open. I get contacted by headhunters. The FDA just wanted a psychometrician just a short time ago. Private corporations, Fortune 500 companies, the large ones all have assessment teams. Accenture has an assessment team, Microsoft, Google, Facebook just had an ad out. I was almost tempted to apply. Stock options to actually make some money. They were looking for a psychometrician maybe a couple months ago, reporting to good old Mark there. So I mean, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and I think I already mentioned it, the healthcare field as well. I mean, basically, it's quant. If you have quant and qualitative skills, there's a lot of opportunities for you. I'd estimate the folks coming through our online program and the master's program, maybe 50–60% want to have something to do with education, whether it's institutional research or working on grants or eventually going for an academic position. The other 40% or so, they just want the quant skills. Then they're going to go back to their own field and be the quant person. Historically, the quant programs are either housed in educational psychology, and sometimes they're housed in a quantitative psych program. And so at most Division I research institutions, those that want to get the quant skills from another field come to one of those programs, get the quant skills, and go back. We've had a lot of people come through from the occupational and physical therapy fields. They come to us, they get all the quant skills, and they go back to OT and PT, and they're like the go-to researcher in their field. So just because we're housed in educational psychology doesn't mean all of our students necessarily want to work in education. Some of them, quite frankly, don't want anything to do with the politics and stuff that goes on with education. They want to take they want the quant skills, but they want to go back to their home field to be the researcher. Yep.
I have a question. What makes you a psychometrician? I mean, is it master title, is it PhD title, is it because you take some fun course?
Well, my background, my bachelor's was in mathematics. I was going to be an engineer, but after 2 years of playing with circuits and not talking with anybody, I was like, this isn't for me. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was good at math. So I got my degree in math, and I still didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to be an actuary, and I found out I had to take 10 years worth of exams after school, so I said, forget that. So both my parents were teachers, so how high quality the data is before you do the statistical analysis.
Making the instruments,
right?
Making
so making
sound
the
instruments.
Doing the reliability and validity studies, and if all that looks good, then you go ahead and do the statistical analyses. And so that opened up Keith's eyes. So he was halfway through, maybe more than halfway through his PhD in stats, and he dumped it. And he came over and he got his PhD over here in psych. So that takes a lot of guts to dump 2-3 years worth of work and then basically start over, because he saw if you don't have quality data, it doesn't matter what you do with the statistical analysis. Some other questions that we can just open it up to anybody? We have about 5 minutes if folks want to open up anything.
I think it was answered as I just waited, the question I had was answered.
Anything else? I want to thank everybody for attending and for all those out there and I guess live streaming, because I didn't know about this until 2 days ago. That we were live streaming. So we're going to edit this down as well, and we'll post it. And if folks are interested in getting the link, just shoot an email to Terry. She'll collect some names and then contact me. For those of you who are watching out there and watching the recorded video, we'll have a link at the end so you can find out more about the programs that we have here at UIC. Thank you.
I should give you my.
Well, if you have one, I'll take it for the garage. I mean, I can pay, but I might as well not have it if you got them. Thank you.
Shauna Cooper Hill.
I'll take one. Because you have a lot of